This video is brought to you by Ground News. For decades, fish have been a major source of disagreement between the EU and UK. From arguments over the EU's common fisheries policy, to the 2012 scallop wars, to the ongoing post-Brexit dispute, fishing rights remains one of the stickiest areas of the UK-EU relationship, with the Financial Times reporting last week that EU officials are threatening to time limit a potential trade deal on food and drink products unless European fishers get long-term access to British waters. So in this video, we'll try to explain the ongoing UK-EU fishing dispute, why it's hotting up again, and what might happen next. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. To understand the debate, we've got to start with the UK and EU's post-Brexit trade agreement, known as the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, or TCA. Before Brexit, fishing terms were prescribed by the EU's common fisheries policy, which was criticised by the UK fishing industry for allowing European vessels to benefit more from access to the UK's waters than the other way around. While the post-Brexit TCA was intended to address this, the TCA's fishing terms don't actually kick in until after the 5.5-year phase-in period, which ends in June 2026, after which point the UK and EU will be subject to annual negotiations to agree on catch limits for commercial fish stocks. After these limits are agreed, the UK and EU will grant each other's fishing vessels access to each other's waters, again at a level agreed in the consultations. However, the EU doesn't want talks every year, as this creates uncertainty for European fishers, so is instead pushing for a new longer-term settlement lasting several years, similar to the current phase-in agreement signed until 2026. But the current deal was criticised by British fishers who complained that the UK got less than expected, both due to the EU's leverage over access to their market and because British officials were reportedly underprepared for fisheries negotiations. That's why there's pressure on the UK government not to extend the current deal and to instead negotiate new terms that are more favourable to British fishers. But there's also another element to the fishing dispute, which is specifically over Sandeel fishing. For context, in late March 2024, a few weeks after the UK and EU had agreed the terms for Sandeel fishing, the UK and Scottish governments prohibited industrial Sandeel fishing in the English waters of the North Sea and in all Scottish waters, due to evidence-based concerns that declining Sandeel populations could impact seabird numbers off the coastline. Because Sandeel, which are small eel-like fish, serve as a food source for threatened seabird species like puffins and kittiwakes, the UK's Royal Society for the Protection of Birds had actually been campaigning for a ban on industrial Sandeel fishing for some 25 years, with both puffins and kittiwakes red-listed in the UK as birds of highest conservation concern. However, Sandeel were almost entirely caught by European fishers, with 97% of the quota for Sandeel in the North Sea given to Danish vessels, so the ban disproportionately impacted the EU. In response, the EU launched a dispute in April 2024, arguing that the ban breached the TCA's fishing terms agreed the previous month, and that it discriminated against European vessels. As the two sides were unable to resolve it through further consultations, the EU then requested an arbitration tribunal in October 2024, the first time this had happened after Brexit. Then, in late January, a court in The Hague heard arguments from both sides, the EU's being that the UK Sandeel fishing ban breached the terms of the TCA, wasn't based on scientific evidence, and discriminated against European fishers, and the UK's being that the ban reflected scientific findings on the role of Sandeel in marine food chains, and that it wasn't discriminatory. Then, earlier this month, the court delivered its decision, which was mixed. The tribunal concluded that while the ban was disproportionate in English North Sea waters, thereby siding with the EU and requiring the UK to take steps to reverse it in English waters, it held up in relation to Scottish waters, where the challenge was rejected. The court also dismissed the EU's arguments that the ban was discriminatory and not rooted in scientific evidence. So while both sides could feasibly view parts of the ruling as a victory, it still hasn't solved the dispute. The Financial Times has reported that EU officials are threatening to time limit any new agreements to remove barriers on UK agricultural exports across the Channel, a deal that UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer had been trying to secure for months to reduce uncertainty, delays and potential losses for British exporters at the border, unless the EU gets long-term access, reportedly for at least another 5 years, to British fishing waters. This is basically to put pressure on Starmer to extend European fishers' access beyond June 2026, when the current agreement is due to expire, as a condition for a future UK-EU security or trade deal. The EU also reportedly wants this agreed as soon as possible, ideally before the UK-EU summit on the 19th of May. France specifically has repeatedly indicated that it won't agree to any future EU deals with the UK, unless the fishing rights dispute has been resolved. Although the EU's chief diplomat Kaja Kallas and European Council President Antonio Costa have pushed back on this, suggesting the issue of fishing rights shouldn't obstruct a security deal, with Kallas saying she was surprised at how important the fish are. Nevertheless, Starmer may be forced to agree to this due to the EU's leverage over future deals. Brussels appears to have made clear that continued access to UK waters for European fishers is a central demand for a defence and security deal with the UK, and for any potential future trade deal, and would argue that the UK's dependence on the EU market makes it the weaker partner in negotiations. So, while extending access to UK waters could arguably benefit the EU more, if Brussels keeps insisting upon it, and there's currently no sign of the EU backing down, then Starmer may have to concede. As we covered in another recent video, it's also likely that the UK will have to agree to some kind of youth-free movement, which is the EU's other main demand, by or at the upcoming summit on the 19th of May. Another internal factor is rising pressure from businesses for the UK to get a trade deal with the EU. Last month, major UK supermarkets, including Sainsbury's and Marks & Spencer, wrote an open letter to the government urging both sides to reach an agreement, and business impatience seems to be growing, with a survey in April by the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales showing business confidence had fallen to its lowest level since 2022. The UK public also see trade as a crucial part of a UK-EU reset, with a Best for Britain YouGov survey from April showing trade as the top priority for the upcoming summit, followed by illegal immigration and then by defence and security. A trade deal would potentially benefit UK fishers too, who have faced difficulties exporting to the EU after Brexit. So, while the UK government has previously rejected a link between fishing rights and a security or trade deal, the EU does seem to want fisheries to be a central part of negotiations. The question is whether Starmer will take the bait. This is a complex and nuanced story though, and as such there's plenty more to read about this online, with 52 sources reporting on it. The issue is, how can you be sure that what you're reading isn't hugely biased? Well, that's a problem we face when making these videos too, and luckily that's where this week's sponsor Ground News comes in. For this story in particular, they've identified that there were at least 6 left-leaning and 12 right-leaning sources reporting on it. In fact, in addition to this, they've also shown the main differences in headlines among left-leaning and right-leaning outlets, with those on the left focusing on the risks of the fishing dispute tanking UK-EU defence plans, and the right focusing on the need for a UK-EU defence pact. We're able to do that because of our sponsor Ground News, whose incredible website and app lets you discover the news and pulls back the curtain on media bias. That's because every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership of the source's reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organisations. But one of the best parts of the app is their blind spot feed. It presents you with stories and articles that haven't been reported on by one side of the aisle or the other, helping you better break out of your media bubble and discover what those on the other side of the political spectrum are really saying. This is all in addition to the biased distribution we mentioned earlier, and together these fantastic features help you to figure out exactly who's behind the stories you're reading and what agenda they may have. Ground News is such a useful tool for our current media landscape, and I think an app like this will only become more essential as the media landscape continues to evolve. If you're interested in everything that Ground News has to offer, you can get 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage plan using the link in the description or by scanning the QR code. This offer is only available here, so make sure you go to ground.news/TLDR or click the link in the description to get started and support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.